What if one accidental message could rewrite the story of your life? She was invisible, just another quiet face behind the glow of office lights, staying late when everyone else had gone home. A woman of quiet strength, holding her world together with coffee, compassion, and the kind of dignity no one notices until one small mistake made her seen. A single photo, a plaid pajama top under a business blazer sent to the wrong number, to her boss, to a billionaire who hadn't smiled in years. That message should have ended her career. Instead, it started something no one saw, coming a journey through scandal, betrayal, and the quiet power of two people learning what it really means to be seen, to be forgiven, and to begin again. But tell me, have you ever wondered if your most embarrassing moment might actually be the universe giving you a second chance? Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about love or mistakes. It's about rediscovering your own worth when the world stops seeing you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let's begin the Pajama Photo Story. The lights on the 38th floor of Redwood Systems hummed like tired bees trapped behind glass. Outside, November rain fell against the windows soft at first, then harder, its rhythm filling the empty spaces where voices used to be. It was almost 9:30. Most employees had fled the building hours ago, but Emma Caldwell stayed behind, as she often did. The glow from her monitor, the only color left in the office. Click, scroll, type, save. She moved through the motions of her work with quiet precision, every keystroke deliberate, every file labeled just so. Her cubicle was a small island of order pens aligned by color, sticky notes trimmed, a mug that read, "World's Okayest Assistant." No one ever laughed at that mug, mostly because no one noticed it. Emma covered shifts when others called out. She proofread reports that didn't have her name on them. Her reward was silence, the kind that swallows a person whole until they start to forget their own edges. She leaned back and rubbed her eyes. Beyond the maze of cubicles, she could see a single light still burning through a wall of frosted glass. The corner office of Nathan Reed, the CEO. He was still here too. Of course he was. Nathan had a reputation in the company that bordered on myth. Sharp, unyielding, the man who built Redwood from a two-person startup into a billion-dollar tech empire. He spoke little, demanded much, and dismissed nonsense like swatting dust from his sleeve. Emma had never been closer than a polite nod in the hallway. Yet, from this distance, she could picture him exactly, sleeves rolled, tie loosened just enough to look human, but not enough to invite conversation. She wondered what kept him there night after night. Maybe the same thing that kept her, some mixture of duty and habit, the quiet fear that if you stopped moving, everything might fall apart. The air conditioning sighed through the vents. Somewhere, an elevator dinged and closed again, its sound fading into the hum of servers down the hall. Emma looked at the clock, 9:42 p.m. Her father would be waiting for her nightly call. She shut down her screen and gathered the papers scattered across her desk. Her phone buzzed once, a reminder she'd set herself. "Call Dad, don't skip tonight." She smiled. All right," she whispered, as if he could hear her nagging through the device. She walked to the window, staring down at the Portland streets glistening under the street lamps. The world looked softer through rain, like a painting with the edges smudged. Pressing the phone to her ear, she listened to the first two rings before the familiar voice answered. "Hey, still at that fancy building. Almost done? Dad." Her tone lightened instantly. "I swear these reports multiply when no one's watching." He laughed, a warm, rasping sound that always reminded her of wood crackling in a stove. "You always did like order too much. Remember your dollhouse? You used to label the furniture." She chuckled. "And you used to sneak the chairs around just to see if I'd notice." "You always did." For a moment, silence stretched comfortably between them. The good kind, filled with shared history instead of distance. "How's the heart today?" she asked. "Ticking along? The doc says it's stubborn, like its owner." Emma smiled, though her eyes softened. "Good. Don't overdo it." "Okay, I'll come by Saturday." "You work too much." I know." She hesitated. but somebody's got to pay the bills. You're doing enough. More than enough. His voice carried pride, but underneath it she heard fatigue. That mix scared her more than any corporate deadline ever could. "I'll bring that soup you like," she said gently. "Get some rest. You too, kiddo. And remember, steady hands, steady life." The call ended with the familiar click, and the room felt quieter than before. Emma let the phone rest against her chest. For all the exhaustion, there was comfort in that routine, a tether between her small world and the wider one that never seemed to notice her. She turned back toward the office. Nathan's light was still on. Through the frosted glass, she could see his silhouette move a brief stretch, the flicker of a hand brushing through hair. Then stillness again. The sight stirred something pity, maybe, or recognition. People like him weren't supposed to be lonely, yet she sensed he was a man building empires but forgetting how to rest. She looked down at her own reflection in the glass wall, a neat woman in her late 30s, face calm but tired, blouse buttoned to the collar, eyes that wanted something unnamed. "Just one more report," she whispered, as though promising the reflection a small mercy. The computer hummed awake again, filling the silence with the soft pulse of electricity. She typed for another half hour, lost in the rhythm of numbers and words, until her mind floated between focus and dream. Outside, the rain eased into mist. A cleaning crew arrived on the lower floor, their muffled chatter faint through the stairwell. Emma saved the document, printed the summary, and slid it into a folder marked Read Q4 Overview. She placed it in the overnight tray, aligning the edges with the precision of someone who believes neatness can keep chaos away. Then, almost against her will, she looked once more toward that glowing office. The light had gone out, for some reason. The darkness felt lonelier now that it was complete. She gathered her coat, draped her scarf around her neck, and whispered a soft good night to no one in particular. In the elevator, descending through floors of sleeping machinery, she watched her reflection in the mirrored doors blur with each level that passed. By the time she reached the lobby, she looked less like an employee and more like a ghost leaving a dream behind. Outside, the cool night air met her with the clean scent of rain and cedar. She pulled her hood up, breathed in deeply, and started toward the parking lot. Behind her, high above the city, the tower stood quiet, every window dark but one. A small lamp flickered on again in the CEO's office, casting a thin stripe of light into the wet night. Emma didn't see it, but if she had, she might have wondered why the man who never noticed anyone stayed just long enough to watch her cross the street. By the time the office clock blinked 1:15, the last of Emma Caldwell's focus had finally begun to fade. The screensaver on her computer glowed with the company logo, bright, sterile, impersonal. She rubbed her neck and leaned back in her chair, feeling the quiet pulse of exhaustion behind her eyes. Outside, Portland's rain had softened to a fine drizzle, a gentle shimmer against the tall windows. The world beyond the glass looked peaceful, almost forgiving. Inside, the air felt heavy with the weight of undone things. Emma's blazer was still buttoned, but beneath it she wore her favorite secret, her soft plaid pajama top. The blue and cream fabric was worn thin at the sleeves, frayed from 100 washes, but it brought comfort in a place that never did. She had thrown it on that morning without thinking, telling herself no one would notice. No one ever did. She smiled faintly, opening her phone to text her dad before heading home. "Hey, old man, still burning the midnight oil." She paused, smirked, and lifted the phone to snap a quick selfie, her blazer crisp, her eyes tired, the collar of the flannel shirt peeking through. The shot was unflattering and silly, but it made her laugh. For once, she didn't look like an invisible part of the machine. She looked human, still working late again. She typed, "But at least I've got my secret weapon plaid pajamas under the armor." She hit send, slipped her phone into her purse, and reached for her coat. The elevator dinged down the hall, one long, lonely note echoing through the empty space. She took a deep breath, savoring the relief of being done for the night. Then her phone buzzed. Once, twice. She glanced at the screen and froze. At the top of the message thread, glowing like a cruel joke, was the name Nathan Reed. The world tilted. She blinked, her stomach dropping. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. Her thumb flew across the screen. Maybe she could delete it. Maybe there was a recall option. Maybe no. The company chat app didn't have unsend. There it was, her message, her stupid words. And, oh God, the picture. Her plaid pajama collar in full view, her half smile that looked too personal, too casual. Her heart kicked against her ribs, hard and fast. Every muscle in her body tensed as if she'd just tripped over a cliff edge. What have I done? Images flashed through her mind, security escorting her out. Whispers in the break room. Cynthia Harper's smirk when HR announced Emma Caldwell's inappropriate communication. She could see her father's disappointed face, the hospital bills waiting on the counter, the look of, oh, sweetheart. You meant well that always followed her mistakes. It was just one text, she thought, one stupid human moment. The elevator chimed again. She nearly jumped. Her phone was still glowing in her hand, the photo sitting there like a loaded confession. Emma's pulse raced as she opened her outbox, maybe, somehow. She'd clicked the wrong chat. Maybe there was still time. No. It was done. Sent. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, skin pale. She imagined Nathan Reed seeing it, his cool, unreadable expression tightening just a fraction, that calculating mind filing her name under unprofessional. He would never say a word. He wouldn't have to. Silence from him would be enough. She locked her phone and shoved it into her purse like a dangerous thing. Her breathing came shallow, her fingers trembling. I can fix this? Maybe an email? Maybe apologize first thing tomorrow. She rehearsed it under her breath, whispering into the empty hallway, Mr. Reed, I'm terribly sorry for the mix-up. That message was intended for my father. No, too stiff. Mr. Reed, please ignore the previous message. It was sent in error. Still wrong. Everything sounded worse out loud. She pressed the elevator button and waited, her heart pounding in her throat. The metallic hum filled the corridor like a cruel countdown. Her phone buzzed again. Once. She froze. Please don't be him. Slowly, she took it out. The preview line read, Nathan Reed. The words appeared simple, harmless, but they blurred as she read them. Comfort suits you. We could all use a little of that around here. She stared, not breathing. Her thoughts stopped. No panic, no embarrassment, just confusion, sharp and clean. He wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He wasn't Nathan Reed, the ice-blooded CEO. He had made a joke, a gentle one. Her fingers hovered above the screen. She didn't know whether to reply, or pretend it never happened, or laugh out loud until she dissolved. Was he teasing? Was he being kind? The elevator doors opened behind her with a low sigh. She stepped in automatically, eyes still on her phone, as though afraid the message might disappear if she blinked. Her thumb tight before her brain caught up. Thank you, sir. I promise I'll stick to email next time. She hesitated, then hit send. The elevator began its slow descent, numbers blinking past, 38, 37, 36. Her heartbeat softened, but her cheeks still burned. The phone buzzed again. Another reply. Get some rest. Emma? We all forget to take care of ourselves sometimes. Her name. He'd written her name. She exhaled shakily, the sound echoing in the small metal box. The city lights blurred through the elevator glass, raindrops streaking down in thin silver lines. By the time she stepped into the lobby, her panic had dissolved into something quieter, more complicated. Relief. Yes. And something else. Something that felt dangerously like curiosity. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, The wet pavement reflected the world in soft ripples of gold and gray. Emma walked toward her car, her phone still warm in her hand, replaying the words in her mind. Comfort suits you. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. As she started the engine, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was flushed, her lips curved in a small, incredulous smile. "I'm losing my mind," she whispered, yet for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt noticed, and that, she knew, could be just as terrifying. Morning came slow and gray. A thin layer of fog clung to downtown Portland, wrapping the city in quiet indecision, not quite rain, not quite light. Inside the 38th floor of Redwood Systems, the fluorescent lamps flickered awake one by one, chasing shadows across rows of empty desks. Emma Caldwell sat at hers long before anyone else arrived. Her coffee had gone cold. Her stomach churned. The night's embarrassment replayed on a loop in her mind, that stupid selfie, that plaid shirt, that message she couldn't unsend. Every time she thought about it, her face burned hot again. Comfort suits you. She could still see the words glowing on her screen. As impossible as a dream you can't shake. What did he mean by that? Was it humor pity or something worse? Awareness. She took a deep breath and straightened the pile of folders on her desk for the third time. By 8:30, people began trickling in voices, footsteps, the faint hiss of espresso machines down the hall. The rhythm of office life returned, and with it, her fragile hope of disappearing back into anonymity, until a shadow crossed her desk. Early start, Emma froze. The voice was smooth, measured, unmistakable. She looked up, and there he was. Nathan Reed. He stood only a few feet away, holding a cup of coffee, perfectly tailored in charcoal gray. The morning light cut through the blinds and caught the edge of his dark hair, turning it almost silver. "Mr. Reed," she managed, her voice barely steady. I wanted to get a head start on the quarterly reports." He nodded once, his expression unreadable but not unkind. That's dedication. A small silence lingered, not the uncomfortable kind, but the fragile kind that could break if anyone breathed too loud. Then, to her utter disbelief, Nathan smiled, just a little. "You made me smile last night," he said quietly. "That doesn't happen often anymore." Emma blinked. The words didn't compute. Her making him smile. I'm so sorry. Mr. Reed, I never meant to. Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. It was refreshingly human. The word human landed like a soft touch against her defenses. "I suppose we could all use a reminder that we're not machines," he added, setting his coffee down on the edge of her desk. She couldn't meet his eyes. Still, it was inappropriate, completely unprofessional. Nathan tilted his head slightly. "You're allowed to be a person." Emma, even here, her name again, spoken with quiet familiarity. Something fluttered in her chest, not excitement, exactly, but recognition. A reminder that beneath her calm, polished surface, there was still a heartbeat. She forced a nervous laugh. "I'll try to remember that next time I commit corporate self-sabotage." He chuckled. "If that's self-sabotage, I might encourage more of it. The company could use a little warmth." The joke hung between them, soft but electric. Emma glanced around, half expecting someone to be eavesdropping. That was when she saw Cynthia Harper, the head of marketing, lingering near the break room, tall, poised, with a sharp red manicure that matched her lipstick. Cynthia's gaze flicked from Nathan to Emma, one quick, assessing look, then she turned away, her heels clicking down the hallway. Emma's stomach tightened. Nathan followed her glance. "Something wrong?" "No, sir," she said quickly. "Just thinking about deadlines." He studied her for a beat longer, eyes thoughtful. Then he smiled again, more gently this time. "Try not to overthink everything. Emma, not every mistake is a disaster." She nodded, unsure what to do with her hands, unsure what to do with this version of him, the one who sounded almost kind. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back. "By the way," he said, "you were right about the comfort factor. I switched to flannel pajamas last night. Best sleep I've had in months." Emma's jaw dropped. "You're joking." His grin widened just enough to tell her he wasn't going to answer that. Then he walked away, leaving her staring after him, heart drumming against her ribs. The office noise gradually returned. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, conversations starting, but none of it reached her. She sat perfectly still, hands resting on the desk, trying to piece together what had just happened. Nathan Reed, the man who never smiled, never joked, never broke character, had just made fun of himself. For her, it didn't make sense. It didn't belong in her world. And yet, there it was, undeniable and warm. She pressed her fingers to her lips, half smiling, half terrified. Around 10 o'clock, Cynthia reappeared by the coffee machine, chatting too brightly with two associates. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward Emma's desk. Emma could feel it, that subtle hum of scrutiny, of curiosity masquerading as casual interest. She tried to focus on her spreadsheets, but her mind wandered back to the moment when Nathan had said, "You made me smile." It was such a small sentence, yet it cracked something open inside her, a door she hadn't realized was locked. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She caught herself glancing at the frosted glass of the corner office, where his silhouette moved, occasionally pacing, pausing, writing. Once, she thought she saw him look her way, but she told herself it was just her imagination. By 5, the office lights dimmed to their evening hue. Emma shut down her computer and gathered her things, the way she always did, orderly, methodical. But when she reached for her phone, her fingers lingered on the screen longer than usual. The last message from Nathan still glowed in the chat. "History, get some rest. Emma." She locked the phone quickly and tucked it away. Boundaries? She needed boundaries. Still, as she stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, her reflection smiled faintly back at her. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't even attraction. It was something rarer being noticed in a world that had trained her to disappear. The elevator hummed softly, descending floor by floor, carrying her into a night that suddenly felt less heavy. The following week began like any other, until Emma found a folded note on her desk. Not an email, not a memo, a handwritten note on thick ivory stationery embossed with the company seal. "Emma, join us in the executive conference room at 10. N.R. Her first instinct was that it had to be a mistake. Executives didn't invite coordinators into strategy sessions. Coordinators took notes from outside the door. Still, at 9:58 a.m., she stood before the glass wall of the top-floor conference room, clutching her notepad like a shield. Inside, 10 of Redwood's most powerful faces circled a polished walnut table, laptops open, suits crisp, voices low. Nathan Reed looked up first. "Ms. Caldwell," he said, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "Have a seat." The room quieted. Emma walked in, feeling every pair of eyes follow her. Across the table sat Cynthia Harper, immaculate in a tailored red blazer. Her smile was polite, her eyes anything but. "New addition to the think tank?" Cynthia asked lightly. "Didn't realize we were expanding the seating chart?" A few muffled chuckles rippled around the room. Emma felt her pulse in her throat. Nathan's tone cut through the noise, calm, but edged with authority. "Emma's been coordinating half of these logistics for years. She might see what we've missed." The laughter died instantly. Cynthia's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Emma sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The screen at the end of the table displayed rows of numbers: quarterly expenditures, upcoming product budgets, regional profit margins. Nathan began the briefing. His voice was steady, controlled, but underneath the calm was something else: fatigue, maybe, or quiet frustration. As the meeting rolled on, Emma kept her eyes on the spreadsheets, patterns, numbers. She'd always been good with patterns. And that's when she saw it. Line 47. Vendor Red Pacific Consulting. The total for their R&D supply contract was listed at $2.6 million, nearly double last quarter's cost, yet the corresponding shipment invoices, which she'd processed herself last month, reflected only half that amount. A clerical error. Possible. But something about it didn't feel like a typo. Cynthia was speaking, her manicured finger tapping the slide. As you can see, our growth initiative will require reallocating another $1.2 million from internal development. It's all accounted for. Emma glanced at the column again. All accounted for. Her stomach tightened. Nathan turned to her. Emma, you manage most of the vendor correspondence, correct? Yes, sir, she said quietly. Anything about these figures stand out to you? The room seemed to lean toward her, waiting. Her mind raced. She could speak now, mention the discrepancy, the missing invoices, but the thought of Cynthia's eyes slicing through her was enough to silence the words forming in her throat. If I say it, I make enemies. If I stay quiet, I keep my job. She swallowed hard. Everything appears consistent with prior filings, she said at last. Nathan studied her for a moment, longer than was comfortable, then nodded slowly. Very well. The meeting moved on. Budgets, projections, marketing strategies all blurring together into polite noise. Cynthia leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. We'll finalize allocations this week, assuming no further inconsistencies. Her gaze flicked to Emma like a warning shot. When the meeting adjourned, chairs scraped against the floor, voices rose, and people began to scatter. Emma stayed behind, stacking papers to avoid eye contact. Ms. Caldwell, Nathan said, stopping at her side. She looked up, half expecting correction, maybe disappointment. Instead, he spoke softly. You saw something in there, didn't you? Emma's breath caught. Sir. He tilted his head. Unreadable. You don't give answers that neat unless you're thinking of the messy ones underneath. Her instinct was to deny it, but something in his tone, less accusation, more invitation, unlocked a sliver of honesty. There was a variance, she admitted quietly. It could be an error. I didn't want to speak out of turn. Nathan folded his arms. Sometimes silence is wise. Sometimes it's costly. The remark lingered, weighty and strange. She looked down. I just didn't want to embarrass anyone in front of the board. Embarrassment is temporary, he said. Integrity lasts longer. He picked up his tablet, then paused before leaving. Thank you for coming. Emma, most people talk to impress. You actually listen? Her heart skipped once, unexpected and sharp. He met her eyes. You're the only one in that room who still listens. And then he was gone, striding down the hallway toward his office, leaving her standing in the echo of his words. The rest of the day unfolded in fragments. Cynthia cornered Emma by the elevators, her voice wrapped in honey but sharp underneath. Quite the performance in there, she said. Be careful, Emma. The closer you stand to power, the easier it is to get burned. Emma smiled politely, the kind of smile that hides both fear and defiance. Thank you for the advice, Ms. Harper. Anytime. Cynthia's heels clicked away, each step deliberate, measured, back at her desk. Emma stared at the numbers again. That line item wouldn't leave her mind. 2.6 million, twice what it should be. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. The hum of the office faded into background static as she typed a note to herself on a sticky pad, Red Pacific Consulting, cross-check invoices. She slid it into the back of her planner, behind the week's schedule, where no one else would see. For now, silence was safer, but safety, she knew, had a cost. That night, long after most had gone home, she caught sight of Nathan again through the glass wall of his office. He stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the edge of his desk, gaze fixed on the city below. For a fleeting second, he looked less like a man in charge and more like someone carrying a secret too heavy to share. And Emma wondered if, behind every polished smile and quarterly report, everyone at Redwood was hiding something. The elevator doors opened onto the 20th floor, a level Emma had never visited in her 10 years at Redwood. It wasn't listed on any department chart. No one talked about it. Nathan stepped out first, his access badge glinting under the low light. "Come on," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've earned a field trip." She followed, uncertain. "I didn't know this floor even existed. Most people don't," he said. "That's the point." The hallway looked different from the sterile, white spaces upstairs. The walls here were deep blue, hung with framed sketches instead of mission statements. The air smelled faintly of cedar and coffee warm. Lived in. He opened a heavy door at the end of the corridor and gestured for her to enter. Emma froze. Inside was something she hadn't expected at all, a private design studio. Not digital screens and code, but drawings. Dozens of them. Hand-rendered concept sketches pinned to cork boards. Colored pencils scattered across a long drafting table. Shelves lined with notebooks and small clay prototypes filled the corners. "This," Nathan said quietly, "is what Redwood was supposed to be." She turned slowly, taking it in. "You drew these?" He nodded. "Before we started chasing quarterly numbers. Before the board meetings and the endless metrics." She stepped closer to the nearest board. The sketches showed early models of the company's first communication devices, rough, human, full of imagination. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "They're imperfect," he corrected, but the pride in his voice betrayed him. That used to be okay. He walked to a shelf and picked up something small, a wooden model ship, carved by hand, its hull smooth but unfinished. "I made this last year," he said. "When I thought about quitting," her eyes lifted. "Quitting." He set the ship down gently. "Burnout. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The company became the thing that owned me instead of the other way around." The admission hung in the air, quiet but heavy. Emma hesitated before speaking. "I know that feeling." He glanced at her, curious. "My dad used to say, work should build you, not bury you. But after Mom died, he buried himself in his shop. He builds wooden furniture, still does when his hands cooperate. It's how he keeps the world steady." Nathan listened, his expression softening. "He's the one in the photo on your desk." "Yes." She smiled faintly. "Heart problems now. I visit every weekend, but it's hard watching the person who taught you strength lose his own." Nathan studied her, eyes gentle but sharp, like he was reading beyond her words. "You take care of everyone, don't you?" Emma shrugged, trying to make it sound lighter. "Someone has to." He smiled, not unkindly. "I used to believe that too. Until I realized you can't take care of everyone and expect to stay whole." Their gazes met across the table. For a moment, the hum of the city outside was the only sound. Emma felt something shift, something subtle but undeniable. The air between them carried that quiet charge, the kind that lives in the space between two people who finally see each other. She looked away first, focusing on the model ship. "You made this with your hands." "Yes," he said. "There's something honest about working with wood. You can't fake precision with a chisel." "My father would agree," she murmured, running her fingertips lightly along the edge of the small hull. "He says wood remembers every mistake." Nathan's smile deepened. "Then maybe mistakes are what make it real." Emma caught herself smiling back, then quickly stepped away. "You should keep this place hidden. If the board knew you actually had a soul, they'd panic." He laughed quietly, a warm, genuine sound that made her chest tighten. "Maybe you're right, for a moment." They stood side by side, looking out the window at the stretch of Portland below. The river glinted in the distance, gray under the winter sky. He spoke again, softer now. "You know, I wasn't supposed to build companies. I wanted to design things that made people feel connected. Redwood was meant to be about communication. Ironically, I stopped communicating somewhere along the way." Emma glanced at him. "Maybe you just forgot how—" He turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you haven't." The question caught her off guard. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I talk to people every day, but it's mostly logistics, not life. Nathan nodded, as if that made perfect sense. That's still more than most. The clock on the far wall ticked quietly, filling the pause between them. I should get back, she said at last. Before someone assumes you're being held hostage by HR, he chuckled, I appreciate your concern. When they stepped into the elevator, neither spoke at first. The hum of descent filled the silence steady, low, almost rhythmic. At the 10th floor, the doors opened. Cynthia Harper stood there, her expression perfectly composed, but her eyes sharp as glass. Nathan. She greeted smoothly. I didn't realize you had company. He offered a neutral nod, just showing Emma one of the old project archives. Of course, Cynthia said, her tone honey-sweet. Always good to revisit the past. Her gaze flicked to Emma's, one eyebrow arched, then back to Nathan. We're meeting about the vendor audit this afternoon. Yes, 3 o'clock, perfect. Cynthia smiled, stepped aside, and let the doors close. The elevator resumed its descent. Emma exhaled slowly, pulse still elevated. She's going to start a rumor, she muttered. Nathan's tone was calm. Let her. Rumors can't hurt truth. She looked up at him, uncertain whether he truly believed that. When the doors opened on the main floor, they stepped out together. For a moment, their arms brushed, neither spoke, but as Nathan turned to head toward his office, he said quietly, Thank you for seeing this place for what it is. Emma tilted her head. And what is it a reminder, he said, pausing just long enough for his voice to soften, that not everything valuable can be measured. Then he walked away, leaving her standing by the elevators with the faint scent of cedar still clinging to her sleeve. She didn't know what scared her, more Cynthia's watchful eyes, or how easy it had become to care. By Monday morning, the air at Redwood Systems carried a different kind of charge, not excitement, not urgency, something quieter and sharper, curiosity with teeth. Emma felt it the moment she stepped off the elevator. Conversations hushed when she passed. Laughter started again only after she'd gone by. It wasn't imagination. It was the sound of a story growing legs. She'd seen this before, how gossip bloomed in fluorescent light like mold on forgotten bread. It didn't need truth, only attention. And right now, she had everyone's. The first sign came at the coffee machine. 2 junior analysts whispered near the sugar packets, pretending not to stare, heard they were seen leaving the elevator together. Late Friday night. Can you believe it? The CEO. No wonder she's still here after the budget mess. Emma poured her coffee slowly, pretending not to hear, pretending the spoon didn't tremble as it stirred. She managed a polite smile as she passed them. Morning. Their return smiles were too quick, too bright. By noon, the whispers had shape. By 2, they had Cynthia Harper's perfume. Cynthia moved through the office like a breeze through curtains, graceful, scented, deliberate. Every gesture of hers was theater, every glance, a headline waiting to be written. Emma, Cynthia said sweetly as she stopped by her desk. Do you have a moment? Emma straightened. Of course. Ms. Harper? Cynthia's smile could have cut glass. HR mentioned they've received a few inquiries about your new involvement with executive operations. I assured them it's entirely professional. The words landed like drops of acid, mild but burning. Thank you, Emma said carefully. Cynthia tilted her head. Of course. Though between us, optics can be tricky. People talk. I'd hate for a misunderstanding to cast a shadow on your reputation, or Nathan's. The use of his first name was deliberate, intimate, possessive. Emma's throat tightened. I understand, she said, though she didn't. Not really. Cynthia's smile deepened. Good. You've been such a help to him lately. I'm sure the board appreciates loyalty. Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of lilac and something metallic like the aftertaste of a lie. The rest of the afternoon blurred into static. Emma tried to focus on the spreadsheets before her, but every number doubled, every formula misfired. Her mind kept circling the same thought. They think I'm sleeping with him. The shame came first, hot, suffocating. Then came anger, slow, cold, settling deep. It didn't matter that nothing improper had happened. In offices like this, perception was louder than truth. By 5 o'clock, she couldn't take the walls anymore. She slipped into the ladies' room, locked the stall door, and pressed her palms against the cool metal. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. Maybe Cynthia's right, she thought. Maybe it's better to leave before this gets worse. She stepped out and faced the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look weak. She looked tired, yes, but steady. A few strands of hair had fallen loose from her bun. Faint circles shadowed her eyes. But there was something else there, too. Something she hadn't noticed before. Resolve? She leaned closer to the mirror, whispering the thought aloud, as if testing its weight. You didn't do anything wrong. Her reflection said nothing, but it didn't flinch either. You've worked too hard to let a rumor undo you. Her voice steadied. If you walk away now, they'll write the story for you. That sentence landed hardest. She turned off the faucet, straightened her blouse, and pressed her shoulders back. When she opened the restroom door, it felt like stepping back into a battlefield she hadn't realized she'd been fighting on. At 6:30, when most employees had gone home, the glass conference room lights still glowed. Nathan was inside, speaking with the finance team. His expression was serious, his gestures deliberate. Through the glass, Emma caught a few words: audit, vendor discrepancies, external review. Her stomach twisted, the audit already coming. Cynthia stood near the door, arms folded, watching Nathan with a faint smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Emma paused by the copier, pretending to organize papers. From this distance, she could see the tension tightening Nathan's jaw, the exhaustion behind his controlled tone. When the meeting ended, people filtered out. Cynthia left last, throwing Emma a glance as sharp as the sound of her heels on tile. Nathan noticed Emma standing there and approached. "You're still here?" he said softly. "So are you," she replied. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Touché? For a moment? They stood in the low light, surrounded by the hum of servers and rain against the windows. He glanced toward the empty hall. Rough day. She hesitated. Rumors travel fast in buildings made of glass. His brow furrowed. "About you?" She nodded once. "About us." Nathan exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "Cynthia, I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The silence between them deepened, not cold, but heavy with everything unspoken. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "You don't deserve that." Emma met his gaze. "Steady now. I can handle whispers. What I can't handle is injustice." Nathan's eyes softened. "You remind me of why I started this company?" She gave a small, sad smile. "Then maybe you need to remember that again." He nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening into something like respect. "You're staying." "Yes," she said firmly. "Not because I'm stubborn, because I'm right." A flicker of admiration passed through his expression. "Good. I'll need people like you when the audit starts." He started to walk away, then paused. "Emma, don't let them make you smaller than you are." She stood there long after he'd gone, the echo of his words lingering in the dim corridor. Outside, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, relentless. Emma gathered her coat, the whisper of gossip still alive somewhere in the building, but it no longer owned her. As she stepped into the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored door. This time, she didn't look away. The woman staring back wasn't invisible anymore. She was tired, yes, frightened, maybe, but unbroken. And for the first time, Emma Caldwell smiled at her reflection, not because she felt powerful, but because she finally felt real. The conference room felt colder than usual that morning, an odd kind of chill that came not from the air conditioning, but from anticipation. A dozen members of Redwood's board of directors were already seated, their laptops open, their expressions neutral and unreadable. At the far end of the long table sat Nathan Reed, his tie perfectly straight, eyes focused on the agenda before him. Across from him, Cynthia Harper adjusted her blazer and offered a polite, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emma stood near the corner of the room, taking notes for the record. She'd been invited to assist with the presentation slides. Nothing more. Still, she could feel the weight of every glance. The large digital screen at the head of the table glowed with graphs and figures, the same numbers she'd seen before, the same ones that hadn't stopped whispering in her mind since the day she noticed the irregularity. Nathan began the meeting in his usual calm tone. Our objective today is to finalize the upcoming quarter's allocations and address vendor concerns before the external audit begins. The word audit seemed to thicken the air. Cynthia spoke next, her voice honey smooth, but with a blade beneath it. Of course, Nathan. Though before we proceed, I think it's crucial to ensure all documentation is accurate and handled by qualified staff. Her eyes flicked toward Emma. The message was clear. Emma felt heat crawl up her neck. She kept her eyes on her notepad, though her hands trembled slightly. Nathan didn't miss the exchange. Ms. Caldwell has managed our documentation flawlessly for the past 3 years, he said, his tone measured. If you're implying otherwise, I'd prefer we discuss evidence, not insinuation. Cynthia's smile didn't falter. Oh, no implication. Of course. I simply believe that, with the company under scrutiny, we should be careful about appearances. The pause before that last word was long enough for the meaning to sink in. Emma's pen stilled on the page. Appearances. She could almost hear the echo of the office rumors, still alive and feeding in the background. Nathan leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, but his voice firm. Then, let's be clear. Our people are not appearances. They're professionals. Emma stays. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. A few board members exchanged glances. No one challenged him. Cynthia blinked once, then smiled tightly. Of course. As you wish. The meeting continued, but the tone had shifted. Emma's pulse thudded in her ears as she advanced the next slide, her face calm, her stomach in knots. Gratitude swelled quietly inside her. He had defended her, not just privately, but publicly. Yet along with it came fear. He had drawn a line in the sand, and now everyone knew which side she stood on. She scribbled notes to keep her hands busy. At one point, she caught the eye of a man seated halfway down the table, gray-haired, suit slightly rumpled, expression thoughtful. Harold Mason. He was one of the longest-serving board members, older than most of them, with a reputation for being blunt but fair. He gave her a small nod, almost imperceptible, but kind. Emma returned the gesture before lowering her eyes again. The rest of the meeting was a blur of jargon and financial forecasts. Nathan's voice stayed calm, firm. Cynthia's stayed sweet, strategic. But beneath the polite tones, the battle lines were clear. When the session ended, the board members stood, murmuring polite goodbyes. Emma gathered her notes, moving quickly to avoid lingering under Cynthia's gaze. Emma, Nathan said quietly as the room emptied. Walk with me. She hesitated, then nodded. They stepped into the hallway together, their footsteps echoing off the marble floor. Thank you, she said softly. You didn't have to defend me. He stopped near the window overlooking the rainy city. Yes, I did. She met his gaze, surprised by the conviction in his voice. You were right about Red Pacific, he continued. Harold confirmed it. There's something off about their payments. We'll know more after the audit. Emma's chest tightened. I was afraid to say anything. Fear keeps good people quiet, Nathan said. That's how corruption survives. He looked out over Portland, his reflection faint in the glass. Sometimes I think this place feeds off silence. Emma followed his gaze. Then maybe it's time to start making noise. Nathan's mouth curved into a small, approving smile. Maybe it is. He started to say something else, but stopped when Cynthia's voice echoed down the hall. Nathan? A quick word about the board memo. Her tone was light, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Emma before softening into feigned warmth. Nathan straightened. Go ahead, Emma said quietly. I should finish compiling these notes. He nodded once, the faintest trace of frustration behind his calm expression. All right. Thank you. Emma. She turned down the corridor, the click of her heels muffled by the carpet. That night, long after the last light in the building dimmed, Emma remained at her desk. She wanted to triple-check her files, anything to stay ahead of the storm she sensed approaching. The building was quiet, the hum of air vents the only sound. Rain tapped gently at the windows, steady as a heartbeat. She inserted a flash drive to back up the meeting notes, then leaned back, stretching her tired neck. Outside the frosted glass of her cubicle, shadows shifted, maybe the cleaning crew, maybe no one at all. She finished saving the files, shut down her computer, and locked her cabinet. As she headed toward the elevator, her phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. Thanks again for today. You handled yourself with grace. Her lips curved into a small, weary smile. But when she returned to her desk the next morning, something was wrong. Her computer was already on. The cabinet drawer she had locked stood slightly ajar, and the flash drive, the one with the board, meeting minutes, and confidential summaries, was gone. She stood there, staring, the quiet hum of the office swallowing her breath. Someone had been here, someone who wanted what she had. The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. Subject urgent. Security inquiry regarding confidential files. Emma stared at the screen, rereading the words until they stopped making sense. Then came the knock at her door, 2 soft raps, followed by the click of the handle. Jared from HR stood there, holding a folder. Behind him, a security officer waited silently. Emma, Jared began, his tone rehearsed. We need to discuss the incident from last night. She blinked. Incident. The files from yesterday's board meeting. They're missing from the system. IT logs show they were last accessed from your workstation around 10:15 p.m. Emma's pulse quickened. Yes, I backed them up before I left. They were on my flash drive, but this morning, it was gone. Jared sighed, the sound heavy and bureaucratic. Then I'm afraid we have a problem. He placed the folder on her desk, sliding it toward her as if it were contagious. Until we can complete our review, we have to suspend your access privileges. The words hit her like static through fog. You think I took them? No one's saying that, Jared replied. But given the sensitivity of the data and your recent proximity to senior leadership, we have to follow protocol. Recent proximity. She could practically hear Cynthia Harper's polished voice echoing behind those words. The security officer stepped forward, polite but impersonal. Ms. Caldwell, I'll need your badge. Emma hesitated, then unclipped it from her blazer. The faint metallic click sounded final, like a door closing behind her. She tried to keep her voice steady. Can I speak to Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed's been informed, Jared said. He's requested to remain neutral during the review. Neutral? The word burned. For a long moment, Emma sat motionless as they left her office. The hum of the computers continued as if nothing had changed, as if the building hadn't just quietly exiled her. By noon, she was driving home in the gray Portland rain, her thoughts pounding louder than the windshield wipers. How quickly everything could unravel. The whispers, the glances, the slow erosion of trust, it all made sense now. Cynthia hadn't just been stirring gossip, she'd been building a case. Emma gripped the steering wheel tighter, her jaw set. She'd done nothing wrong, and yet she was the one being escorted out like a criminal. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Ms. Caldwell. A woman's voice said, "This is Dr. Patel from Mercy General Hospital. It's about your father." The world went still. The hospital corridors smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Machines beeped in slow, uncertain rhythms, marking the fragile line between life and loss. Emma stood outside room 214, clutching her purse like an anchor. Through the glass, she could see her father, David Caldwell, once a man of wide shoulders and louder laughter, now small against the white sheets. His chest rose unevenly beneath the blanket. Dr. Patel met her at the doorway. He suffered a mild heart attack this morning. We've stabilized him, but he'll need close monitoring for the next 48 hours. Emma nodded numbly. Can I see him? Of course. She stepped into the room quietly, afraid even her breathing might disturb him. Hey, Dad, she whispered, taking his hand. It was warm, rough, familiar. You're not allowed to scare me like this. His eyelids fluttered, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Kiddo, you look tired. I could say the same to you, she said, forcing a smile that didn't hold. He tried to squeeze her hand, but the gesture faltered. You still at that place? The tech one. She hesitated. Not anymore. His brows furrowed weakly. Good. Never liked how they treated you. You deserve better. Her throat tightened. Yeah? She whispered. Maybe I do. The monitors beeped softly. The quiet felt sacred. She sat beside him until visiting hours ended, tracing small circles on the back of his hand the way her mother once did when she was sick. When she finally stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights were too bright, the air too thin. That's when she saw him, Nathan standing near the nurse's station, rain still clinging to his coat. For a moment, she thought she was imagining him. Emma, he said softly. How did you— I called HR, he interrupted, guilt in his voice. They told me what happened. Then I heard about your father. Her eyes burned. You shouldn't be here. Maybe not, but I needed to see you. He moved closer, lowering his voice. I don't believe you took those files. Then say that to them, she said sharply. Say it to the people who just stripped my badge and reputation in one morning. His jaw tightened. You know I can't. The board's already watching me. They think I'm compromised. Compromised, she repeated bitterly. Because you defended me. Because I care, he corrected quietly. That broke something in her. She took a step back, shaking her head. Care doesn't fix this. Nathan, it doesn't fix him. She gestured toward her father's room. It doesn't fix the fact that everyone I've worked with now sees me as a liability. He swallowed hard. I'll fix it, I promise you. Don't, her voice cracked. Don't make promises this place won't let you keep. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of hospital machinery and the faint roll of thunder outside. Finally, she exhaled. Go back, Nathan. Save what's left of your company. I'll save what's left of my family. He wanted to argue, but something in her tone stopped him. Emma, he began. Please, she said, voice breaking. Just go. He nodded once, eyes heavy with things he couldn't say, then turned and walked down the corridor until he disappeared into the fluorescent distance. Emma stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade. When she finally stepped outside, the rain hit her face like absolution cold, steady, real. She looked up at the gray Oregon sky and whispered to no one, You can take everything from me, but not who I am. Then she turned toward her car, her father's hospital bracelet still warm in her pocket, and drove into the night without looking back. The days began to blur into one another, soft gray mornings. Quiet afternoons filled with the hum of medical machines, and long evenings scented with antiseptic and rain. 3 weeks had passed since Emma Caldwell had left Redwood Systems. In that time, her life had shrunk down to the size of her father's small house in Beaverton, a few miles outside Portland. She cooked simple meals, managed his prescriptions, read the paper aloud when his eyesight grew tired. The world beyond their walls had gone silent. No office chatter, no elevator buzz, no clipped voices speaking in terms of profit and progress. It should have felt like peace. It didn't. Each morning, she sat by the window with her coffee, watching the fog roll over the neighborhood rooftops. Her father, still recovering, would joke half-heartedly from the recliner. You stare at those clouds like they owe you money. She smiled when he said it, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Redwood. No matter how far she tried to step away. Its shadow lingered. One evening, while washing dishes, she caught a headline on the kitchen radio. In corporate news, Redwood Systems faces a major internal investigation following allegations of data manipulation and missing financial records. CEO Nathan Reed has yet to issue a statement. The company's stock fell 18% this morning. The plate slipped from her hand and clattered into the sink, cracking at the edge. For a moment, she simply stood there, her heart pounding. Nathan? He'd been right about the discrepancies, about the corruption buried beneath the surface. But now, the world thought he was the one to blame. Her first reaction was denial. Then, guilt. He defended me. And now, he's burning because of me. She turned off the radio, leaning against the counter, trying to breathe past the tightness in her chest. Her father stirred in the next room. "Everything okay, kiddo?" "Yeah," she called back, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Just dropped a plate." But that night, she couldn't sleep. 2 weeks later, her father's health had improved enough for short walks around the block. They went slowly, his hand resting lightly on her arm, the February wind cold but clean. He noticed her silence. "You've been somewhere else lately." She hesitated. "You remember Redwood? The CEO I worked for? Hard to forget. You used to come home talking about his impossible standards and his fancy pens." She laughed softly. "He wasn't as bad as I thought. Turns out, he might have been one of the good ones." Her father glanced at her. "And what happened to him?" She looked down. "He's in trouble. The kind that ruins lives. His fault." She shook her head. "No, but that doesn't matter when people want someone to blame." They stopped near a corner bench, the one by the maple tree that had lost most of its leaves. Her father sat, breathing slowly. "Emma, you've got a good heart, but sometimes the world punishes good hearts more than it rewards them. That doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing." His words echoed in her mind long after they went home. The next morning, she began sorting through a box of old work files she'd saved before her suspension copies of harmless reports, presentation drafts, backup drives. She thought she'd deleted everything sensitive, but something inside her wanted closure. She plugged in one of the drives to her laptop. The folders opened, familiar names filling the screen: Red Pacific Consulting, Vendor Audit Q4 Budget Trail Archive. She almost closed it again until she saw a subfolder she didn't remember creating. It was labeled simply RPH, Copies. Curiosity prickled. Inside were spreadsheets, invoices, and transaction logs, some of which she'd never seen before. The timestamps were irregular. Certain entries listed payments processed after she'd been suspended. Her pulse quickened. She scrolled further, tracing the data, the amounts, the vendor codes, the digital signatures. All pointed to the same pattern she'd noticed weeks ago, but now it was worse. Someone had used her credentials to authorize inflated payments to Red Pacific. The approvals were forged down to her digital signature. And the earliest modified file date matched the night the flash drive had disappeared. Her breath caught. Cynthia? No one else had motive. No one else had both the access and the reason to destroy her. She pushed the laptop away and stood up, pacing the small kitchen. If she revealed this, it would expose Cynthia. It would clear her name. But it would also drag her back into the fire, the same one that nearly consumed her and her father's peace. She looked toward the living room, where her father was asleep in the recliner, television humming softly. The world outside had started to dim. The first hints of evening painted the room gold and gray. Her hand trembled as she picked up the drive again. Do I step back into that world? Do I fight the same people who already decided what I was worth? She thought of Nathan, his quiet composure in the boardroom, his words the day she left. Don't let them make you smaller than you are. Her heart twisted. Maybe you were right, she whispered. Maybe silence costs more than it saves. She sat back down, reopened the folder, and began copying the files to a new drive, one labeled with her own handwriting this time. When the transfer finished, she slipped it into a small envelope and wrote one name on it: Nathan Reed, confidential. Then she stared at it for a long time, the rain beginning to tap softly against the window again. Later that night, she stood at the edge of the porch, the wind brushing her hair, the city lights distant and blurred by mist. Her father called from inside. "You all right out there?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. "About doing the right thing, even when it costs you." He chuckled weakly. "That's my girl." Emma looked down at the envelope in her hand, feeling its small weight. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something stir inside her chest, a pulse of purpose, fragile but real. She closed her eyes and whispered into the cool night. "All right then, one more fire." The diner sat on the edge of an old highway outside Salem, the kind of place where the coffee was burnt, the pie was honest, and the rain never really stopped. Harold Mason was already there when Emma walked in, sitting in a corner booth beneath the flicker of a neon open sign. His coat was draped over the seat beside him, and a small notebook lay open in front of him, pages filled with his tight, slanted handwriting. He looked up as she approached. "You came? I wasn't sure you'd answer," Emma said softly, sliding into the booth across from him. He offered a weary smile. When a woman who walked away from a company calls a board member at midnight and says, "It's about the truth. You take the meeting?" Emma took a breath, placed a small flash drive on the table, and nudged it toward him. "This is proof. Cynthia Harper forged financial approvals using my credentials. Red Pacific wasn't just overbilling, they were laundering company funds through ghost accounts. I have every document trail." Harold stared at the drive for a long moment, then leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "My God." She framed me to cover her own tracks. Emma continued. "Nathan's being blamed for negligence. If this goes public, Redwood collapses and Cynthia walks away untouched." Harold folded his hands. "You understand what you're handing me? This isn't just a smoking gun. It's dynamite. I know." He studied her carefully. "Why bring it to me? Because you're the only person there who still believes in right and wrong." That earned her a faint, sad smile. "You sound like Nathan." At the mention of his name, something in her chest tightened. "How is he worn down?" Harold said. "He's fighting the board alone. Cynthia's playing the press like a violin. If you're serious about setting this straight, he needs to see this himself." Emma hesitated. "They won't let me near him." "Then don't ask permission," Harold said. "Drive down tonight. He's in San Francisco for the hearing. I'll make sure you're expected unofficially." She nodded slowly, her pulse quickening with something between fear and determination. "Be careful." "Emma," Harold added, lowering his voice. "Truth has a way of drawing blood before it heals anything." By dusk, the rain had thickened into a storm. Emma's old sedan hummed down the dark stretch of I-5 wipers, slapping rhythmically against the windshield. Lightning flashed over the highway, painting the wet road in momentary silver. Her father had tried to talk her out of going. "Let the suits fix their own mess," he'd said. But she couldn't. Not when innocence and guilt were being rewritten by the people who shouted the loudest. The envelope with the flash drive rested on the passenger seat, sealed tight. Beside it sat a thermos of coffee and a faded photo of her parents on their wedding day, a small reminder of what honesty used to mean. Hours passed in steady rain and static radio noise. She crossed into California near midnight, her mind alive with what waited ahead. What if he blames me? What if I'm too late? When she finally reached the Redwood Systems San Francisco HQ, the city was wrapped in storm clouds, streetlights glowing through the mist like tired stars. Security recognized her name on the clearance list Harold had arranged. They waved her through without question. Inside, the building was dark except for one office light. The top floor, corner window. Nathan Reed was still awake. His office looked different now, papers scattered, half-packed boxes along the wall, a sense of unraveling that hadn't been there before. He stood by the window, jacket off, tie loose, watching the rain streak down the glass like something he couldn't stop. When the door opened, he turned and froze. Emma. Her name left his mouth as both relief and disbelief. She took a tentative step inside. Harold told me what's happening. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. If the board finds out, I don't care about the board. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside filled the silence between them. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You were right, about Red Pacific, about Cynthia. I should have pushed harder when you first noticed it. Emma reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope. Then push now. He frowned. What's this evidence? Everything she did, the forged invoices, the laundering trail, the timestamps that prove she used my access to hide the transfers. Nathan stared at her, then slowly opened the envelope. As he scrolled through the files, the color drained from his face. This clears you, he murmured, and it destroys her. It might destroy you too, Emma said softly. If the board thinks you were negligent, they'll use this to bury you along with her. He looked up, eyes meeting hers. You knew that, and you came anyway. She nodded. Because it's the truth. The lightning outside flared, lighting their faces in pale blue. Nathan set the flash drive on his desk and walked toward her. You could have stayed home, moved on. Why risk everything? Emma swallowed hard. Because someone once told me not to let them make me smaller than I am. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both gratitude and sorrow. I said that. You did. For a heartbeat. The air between them stilled, filled with everything they hadn't said, everything they couldn't. Nathan's voice dropped lower. If we go through with this, Emma, we might lose everything. She held his gaze. Then at least we'll lose it for the right reason. He nodded slowly, the storm rumbling behind him. We'll need Harold's help, and the audit committee. If we time this right, we can present the files before Cynthia realizes they exist. Emma stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes and something softer beneath it. Do you trust me? He asked. I always did, she said quietly. Thunder rolled above the city, deep and resonant. Nathan reached for the flash drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then, let's finish what they started. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied. Rain lashed against the windows like applause for something still unspoken. As they turned toward the door, the dim office light caught the edges of their reflections in the glass, two figures standing together against the storm, fragile but unbroken. The city slept under the storm's thinning clouds. But inside the top floor of Redwood's San Francisco headquarters, two lights still burned, one from Nathan's office. The other, from the conference room, they'd turned into a temporary war room. Stacks of paper littered the table. Screens glowed with spreadsheets, transaction logs, and encrypted backups. A half-empty pot of coffee sat beside a tangle of charger cords. Emma sat cross-legged in one chair, her hair loose now, eyes fixed on the data scrolling before her. Nathan paced behind her, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the glow of the monitors cutting sharp lines across his face. They had been working for 16 hours straight. Look here, Emma said, her voice hoarse but steady. Every transfer from Red Pacific Consulting routes through the same intermediary, Harlan Tech Solutions. It's a shell company. Nathan leaned closer, scanning the data. Incorporated out of Nevada. No employees, no physical address. Exactly, she said, zooming in on a series of codes. But here's the connection. Harlan Tech is registered under a holding firm called C.H. Advisory. Nathan stilled. C.H. He repeated softly. Cynthia Harper. Their eyes met. The truth hung there, bright and terrible. Emma leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her body, but clarity sharpening her voice. She built an entire maze to drain money from Redwood while keeping her name spotless. Nathan sank into the chair across from her, rubbing his temples, and the board let her, because she knew how to make it look profitable. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain had stopped, but the city below was still wrapped in the hush of aftermath. "Do you ever think," Emma said quietly, "that truth only matters when it's convenient?" Nathan looked up at her, eyes tired but alive. "I used to. Now I think it matters especially when it's inconvenient." A small smile tugged at her lips. "That's going to make this harder." He returned the smile faintly. "It always does." Hours later, near dawn, the office lights had dimmed to a softer amber glow. The storm clouds were breaking apart over the bay, streaks of early light bleeding through the blinds. Emma's phone buzzed beside the keyboard. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, Ms. Caldwell." It was Dr. Patel's calm voice. "Your father's latest tests are stable. His recovery is continuing better than expected." Relief flooded her so suddenly she had to close her eyes. "Thank you, doctor, truly." She hung up and leaned back, pressing a hand to her face. A quiet smile found her lips, one not of joy, but peace. Nathan looked up from the other side of the table. "Good news?" She nodded, voice soft. "My dad. He's getting stronger." Nathan studied her for a moment, something warm flickering in his expression. "Then we both have a reason to keep going." She tilted her head. "You have family." He hesitated. "Not really. I've got this company." The way he said it made the word company sound almost human fragile, in need of saving. Emma folded her arms on the table. "You built something good once. Maybe it's not too late to rebuild it." Nathan smiled faintly. "With your help. With the truth," she said. They worked until sunrise, tracing the threads that tied Cynthia's false vendors to offshore accounts, documenting every timestamp, every forged signature. Nathan was meticulous, methodical, relentless. Emma matched his pace, her focus sharp, her intuition guiding where logic couldn't. Somewhere around 1 a.m. The exhaustion turned to a kind of rhythm, two minds moving as one, finishing each other's thoughts, anticipating each step. He noticed it first. "You know," Nathan said, half smiling, "you're better at this than most of the auditors we've ever hired." "I've had practice cleaning up other people's messes," she said dryly. He chuckled softly. "I meant it as a compliment." "I know," she replied, but her eyes stayed on the screen. Still, he could tell she was smiling. A quiet settled between them, not empty, but charged. The kind of silence that meant more than conversation. As morning light filled the office, Emma stood to stretch. That's when she noticed something sitting on the edge of Nathan's desk, the wooden model ship. It was still there, but now a thin crack ran along its hull, a faint reminder of the fall it must have taken during the chaos of the past weeks. She walked over and traced the fracture gently with her fingertips. "It's cracked," she said. Nathan joined her at the desk. "Yeah, I dropped it a few days ago. Thought about throwing it out, but it still floats." She finished softly. He looked at her, and for a moment their reflections aligned in the office window, two faces caught in the same fragile light. "That ship kept me sane once," he said. "Strange how something broken can still carry you." She turned the model in her hands, the tiny sails catching the sunlight. "Maybe it's not about being whole. Maybe it's about staying afloat." Nathan's voice dropped lower. "You always find the better version of things." Emma met his gaze. "And you always look for the storm." He smiled at that tired, genuine, almost tender. By noon, their evidence had taken shape a complete map of Cynthia's deception. Harold Mason would meet them that evening to prepare the board presentation. As Nathan saved the final report, he paused. "Emma," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For coming back when everyone else ran." She hesitated, eyes soft. "You once said I was the only one who listened. Maybe that's why I had to." He stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing to a breath. "We can fix this," he said, his voice low, deliberate, "but we might lose everything." She looked up at him, the faint glow of daylight flickering across her face. "Then let's make sure it's worth the loss. For a heartbeat, The world held still the hum of machines, the light, the air. Then Emma turned back to the table, her voice steady again. "Come on, Captain, let's save your ship." Nathan's laugh was quiet but real. "The first in weeks." "Aye, first mate." And as the wooden model ship sat cracked but unbroken beside them, two weary figures leaned over the glow of their screens, fighting shadows with truth, building something honest in the ruins. The annual Redwood Systems Board Summit was supposed to be ceremonial handshakes, forecasts, polite applause, but this year, the air inside the grand conference hall felt electric, brittle, ready to fracture. Dozens of board members sat around the glossy oval table, their faces lit by the soft blue glow of digital projectors. Beyond the tall glass windows, the San Francisco skyline shimmered beneath a pale gray morning. At the head of the table stood Cynthia Harper, flawless in navy silk, every strand of hair in perfect order. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to controlling the room. "As acting COO," she said, "I regret to report significant leadership failures under Mr. Reed's tenure, failures that have led to the current investigations and public mistrust." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Nathan Reed sat at the opposite end, silent, his expression unreadable, but his jaw set. Cynthia tapped a tablet, and a screen flickered to life behind her, showing slides, graphs, emails, numbers. "Evidence suggests," she continued smoothly, "that sensitive financial data was mismanaged and approval trails were falsified under administrative oversight. The responsibility, ultimately, falls on the CEO's desk." Nathan leaned forward, voice steady. "If you're accusing me of negligence, Ms. Harper, you'd better have more than graphs built on assumptions." Cynthia smiled a predator's smile hidden behind charm. "Oh, I do." She swiped to another slide. Emma's name appeared on the screen. "This former employee," Cynthia said, "had direct access to vendor accounts. Her credentials were used in every suspicious transaction. Conveniently, she disappeared after the files went missing." Whispers surged. Cameras clicked as corporate reporters captured the spectacle through the glass partition. Nathan's hands clenched. "Enough." "Cynthia?" "Oh, I'm just getting started," she said sweetly. "Your poor judgment bringing in unqualified staff, involving them in executive matters, cost this company millions. The board deserves transparency and accountability." "Accountability," Nathan repeated, his voice low but sharp, "isn't a word you get to use while standing on a lie." Her smile didn't waver. "Prove it." The double doors at the end of the hall swung open. Every head turned. Emma Caldwell stood there, soaked from the rain outside, a folder clutched in her hands. Beside her was Harold Mason, face stern, purposeful. The room froze. Cynthia's confidence faltered for the first time. "Security, let her speak." Harold interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of decades. "I called her here." Nathan rose slowly from his chair. "Emma," her eyes met his, steady, unwavering. "I have proof." Harold stepped forward, addressing the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Caldwell possesses verified documentation tracing the funds in question, not to Mr. Reed, not to administrative error, but directly to Ms. Harper's shell companies." The silence that followed was deafening. Cynthia's composure cracked. "That's absurd!" Emma's voice cut through, calm and clear. "You hid the theft behind a maze of vendor accounts. Red Pacific, Harlan Tech, C.H. Advisory, all leading back to your private holding network." She laid the printed spreadsheets on the table, the paper edges trembling slightly in her hands. "These files show the timestamps of every falsified approval right down to the minute. Each one signed using my clone credentials. Each one routed through your accounts." A board member, one of the senior auditors, leaned forward. Scrolling through the data Harold had transferred onto the main screen. His face went pale. "This is authenticated. These logs are internal, encrypted." Cynthia's voice sharpened. "Fabricated. She's framing me to save her boss. Harold's eyes narrowed. I personally verified the metadata with our security division. Every access point traces back to your office server. The room erupted, voices overlapping, questions flying, cameras flashing. Nathan stood still, watching Cynthia, his calm returning like a blade cooling in water. You used her name, he said quietly. You used her decency as your cover. Cynthia's mask slipped completely now. You think I built this empire just to hand it over to moral amateurs? I kept this company profitable while you were chasing ethics. Nathan's expression hardened. And now you've burned it. Security entered discreetly at the far end of the room. Two officers waited for the signal that everyone knew was coming. Cynthia's eyes darted to Harold, then to Emma, then back to Nathan. You're all fools, she hissed. Do you think truth matters when perception owns the room? Harold stepped forward. Perception built this company, Ms. Harper. Integrity will decide if it survives. For a second, she almost laughed. Then she straightened, smoothing her blazer as if the act alone could reassemble her power. You'll regret this, she whispered. Nathan nodded once toward the officers. Take her out. The guards moved closer. Cynthia didn't resist, but as she passed Emma, she stopped just long enough to lean close, her voice low and venomous. This isn't over. People forget truth faster than they forgive it. Emma held her gaze, unflinching. Then I'll remind them. Cynthia's eyes flickered somewhere between fury and fear, and then she was gone. The doors shut behind her with a soft, echoing click. The room was silent. No one moved for several seconds. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector, still casting the frozen image of the fraud trail across the wall. Finally, Harold spoke. Mr. Reed. Ms. Caldwell's findings have been verified. I motion to clear her record of all accusations and reinstate her access privileges immediately. The board members murmured in agreement. Nathan's voice was steady but quiet. Do it. Emma turned to him, exhaustion and disbelief colliding in her chest. It's over, she whispered. He met her gaze, something like awe in his eyes. No, he said softly. It's just finally honest. As the board adjourned, people began to leave, some shaken, some ashamed. Harold placed a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder before departing. For the first time in months, the air in the room felt breathable again. Nathan walked to the window, watching as the storm outside began to clear. You just saved this company, he said. Emma joined him, her reflection faint beside his in the glass. Maybe we save more than that. He turned toward her, voice gentler now. Thank you. Emma, for everything. She smiled, small and weary, but real. Guess we made noise after all. The city stretched before them, gray skies breaking open, sunlight cutting through like forgiveness. Behind them, the polished table sat empty, the documents scattered like ghosts of the battle they'd just fought. And in the silence that followed Cynthia's exit, something new began to breathe inside Redwood, not victory, but truth. The news broke before dawn. Headlines flashed across business networks. Hashtags trended on social media. Redwood scandal exposed, COO removed amid fraud allegations. Nathan Reed, vindicated CEO, cleared of wrongdoing. Anonymous whistleblower, identified as former assistant. The world finally knew the truth, but it didn't feel like victory. In the days that followed, reporters crowded the entrance of Redwood's headquarters. Cameras flashed every time Nathan stepped outside. Microphones angled toward his face. Questions hurled like stones. He answered none of them. Inside, the company was a living wound, departments reorganizing, trust frayed, morale uncertain. Employees whispered in hallways, torn between pride and shame, relief and exhaustion. Emma watched it all from a quiet corner of the HR office, where Harold Mason had asked her to wait. She still wore the same navy coat from that stormy night, the edges damp from San Francisco's unending drizzle. A knock at the open door. Harold entered, carrying a thin folder and a faint smile. Emma, he said, it's official. He handed her the folder, Inside a reinstatement letter, her record cleared, her new title, Director of Ethics and Operations. At the bottom, Nathan's signature. Emma exhaled slowly, the air trembling in her chest. I don't know if I can walk back in there, she admitted, not after everything. Harold studied her. You don't walk back. You walk forward. You earned that right. She closed the folder, her fingers brushing the embossed redwood logo, a symbol once tainted, now carrying the faint promise of redemption, and the apology she asked quietly. Harold smiled wryly. Already drafted, public and personal. Though, if you ask me, Nathan's been apologizing with every hour he's spent rebuilding this mess. Emma's lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. He doesn't owe me that much. Maybe not, Harold said. But some debts can't be measured in paperwork. He started toward the door, then paused. He's on the rooftop garden, by the way. Been there for an hour? Go see him before the press finds him again. The rooftop garden had been Nathan's idea years ago, a small sanctuary atop glass and steel, built with benches, wild grasses, and the smell of wet earth after rain. When Emma stepped outside, she found him there, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, leaning against the railing. The fog hung low over the bay, the Golden Gate faint in the distance. He didn't turn when he heard her footsteps, just said softly, "They offered you your job back." She smiled faintly. Word travels fast. "I signed it myself," he said. Seemed like the only decision everyone could agree on. Emma walked to stand beside him. For a moment, they simply looked out over the city, a skyline washed clean by stormlight. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "You're officially cleared of everything." He laughed under his breath, bitter and tired. "Cleared, sure, but it feels like I just lost a piece of myself." Emma looked at him. "Why does winning feel so heavy?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "Because it's not really winning, is it? It's just surviving what should have never happened." The wind tugged at his hair, carrying the faint smell of salt from the bay. "I keep thinking," he continued, "about how easily it all cracked. Years of work, billions in value, thousands of employees, and all it took was one person's greed, one company's silence." Emma folded her arms. And yet, it wasn't greed or silence that saved it. It was people. He glanced at her. "People like you. People like us," she corrected gently, "who still believe work should mean something, that companies should care about humans, not headlines." Nathan looked down at the street below, the endless motion of cars, lives, ambition. "I don't even know what this place stands for anymore." "Then change it," she said simply. "Make it stand for something worth keeping." He laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Emma said, her voice calm, steady. "But that's the difference between fixing and leading. You fix what's broken, you lead what's possible." He turned fully toward her, then the exhaustion in his face tempered by something new. Not pride, not even gratitude, but recognition. "Do you ever regret sending that photo?" he asked suddenly. She smiled, the memory flickering between them like a spark in the gray air. "Every day," she admitted, "and not at all." Nathan's brow lifted. "How's that work?" She shrugged lightly. "Because it shouldn't have happened, but maybe it had to make us both see what we were missing." He studied her for a long time, the quiet between them deep as the fog. "You make me want to do better," he said finally. Emma met his gaze. "Then start there." Hours later, as the fog thinned and light spilled across the rooftop, Nathan sat on the low stone bench beside her, his shoulders less rigid than they had been in months. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "All the time," she said, "but not in the way I used to. It's not about climbing ladders anymore. It's about building ones other people can climb too." He smiled faintly. "You sound like a leader." Emma's eyes softened. "Maybe I just sound like someone who's tired of watching people get smaller to survive." Nathan leaned back, closing his eyes. "Human first," he murmured. "That's what you said in the meeting, right? You meant it. I always do." A long pause. The city hummed below car horns, distant gulls, the faint rhythm of life resuming. Nathan finally opened his eyes and looked at her. Then help me rebuild it that way. No more empires, no more masks. Just a company that remembers who it's built for. Emma nodded slowly. On one condition, he smiled. What's that? That you stop working through every storm alone. For a moment, the tension broke. He laughed, genuine and light, the kind of laugh that comes after too much silence. I'll try, he said. She rose, brushing rain from her sleeves. Try harder. He watched her walk toward the door, sunlight catching the edge of her hair as the clouds broke apart. Before she disappeared inside, she looked back once more. Nathan? Yeah. Winning doesn't have to feel heavy, she said softly. Not if it leads to something lighter. He watched her go, her words lingering in the quiet morning air. Then he turned toward the bay, the fog lifting at last, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of success giving way to something better, meaning. Spring came early that year. For the first time in a long time, sunlight spilled through the wide glass lobby of Redwood Systems without feeling harsh. The walls no longer echoed with hurried footsteps and whispered anxieties. Instead, real laughter floated through the air. Months had passed since the scandal, and Redwood was no longer the same company that once measured worth in numbers and silence. It breathed differently now. Employees greeted one another by name. Meetings started with stories, not status reports. The break room, once sterile and quiet, now buzzed with shared lunches and open conversations. The words corporate culture had finally come to mean human culture. At the heart of it all was Emma Caldwell, the newly appointed head of the Employee Well-Being Division. It wasn't a title she'd ever imagined having, but somehow it fit. Every morning, she walked through the open office, stopping to talk to the people who had once passed her by without seeing her. She asked about their families, their hopes, their fears, and she listened, really listened. On her desk sat a single-framed photo of her father, smiling broadly beside a half-finished wooden birdhouse. The picture had been taken only a few weeks earlier. He was home now, recovering, stronger, and for the first time, Emma had started to believe that maybe people and companies could heal, too. In late May, Redwood held its annual community renewal gala, not as a publicity stunt, but as a celebration of survival and integrity. The company auditorium had been transformed into something warm and human wildflowers in recycled jars, acoustic music playing softly, long tables filled with employees and their families. It wasn't about suits and speeches anymore. It was about people. Emma stood near the back, watching as Nathan Reed moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling modestly, almost shyly. He looked different, lighter somehow. The tailored perfection of the CEO was gone, replaced by someone more grounded. A few weeks earlier, he had announced his decision to step down as CEO and serve as a senior advisor instead. Redwood doesn't need a figurehead. He'd told the board, it needs a heartbeat. And tonight, that heartbeat was everywhere. Harold Mason stood on the small stage, delivering a short address. We've learned that integrity isn't a department, he said. It's a daily choice. And it's contagious because one person's courage can become everyone's compass. As the applause rippled through the hall, Emma felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. She turned and froze. Dad, she whispered, smiling in disbelief. David Caldwell stood there, wearing his old tweed jacket, a cane in one hand and pride in his eyes. You didn't think I'd miss my daughter's big night, did you? She laughed softly, blinking back tears. You shouldn't be walking this much yet. He shrugged. Doctor said I need to practice living. Figured this was a good place to start. Emma hugged him tightly, her head resting against his shoulder. For months, she'd carried guilt and fear and gratitude in silence, but at that moment, all of it melted into one simple truth they had both survived. I'm proud of you, kiddo, her father murmured. You didn't just get your job back, You made it matter. Emma smiled against his jacket. You always told me to do the right thing, even when it hurts. He chuckled, didn't think you'd take it quite this literally. They both laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt easy. Later that evening, after speeches and music and laughter, Emma stepped outside onto the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, soft and endless. Nathan joined her quietly, carrying 2 glasses of sparkling cider. Thought you might need a break from all the attention, he said, offering her one. Appreciated, she said, smiling. You look happy. He leaned against the railing beside her, maybe for the first time in a long while. Stepping down suits you, she teased. I figured it was time to stop running everything and start rebuilding something. She glanced at him. And what's that something? He turned the glass in his hand. Trust, culture, maybe myself. They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of laughter drifting through the open doors behind them. You know, Nathan said quietly, when this all started, I thought leadership was about control, strategy, power. And now, Emma asked. He looked out over the city. Now I think it's about care, about making sure people don't disappear in the system we build. Emma nodded slowly. That's what grace looks like. Nathan, not perfection, just humanity. He smiled at her, soft and genuine. You taught me that. She met his gaze, her eyes warm. We taught each other. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air was cool, the city alive, and everything that had once felt broken seemed, at last, to be finding its rhythm again. Inside, the crowd began to chant Nathan's name, not with corporate reverence, but with affection. He laughed, shaking his head. I should probably say something before they start carrying me out, he said. Emma grinned. Go, tell them the truth, as always. He started toward the doors, then paused and looked back. You coming in a minute, she said softly. I want to remember this. He nodded once, understanding, and disappeared inside. Emma leaned against the railing, the hum of celebration behind her, the glow of the city before her. For a moment, she thought about the journey from invisibility to influence, from silence to strength, and she realized that grace wasn't something you found at the end of the road. It was what you carried with you to get there. Her father's laughter floated through the open doors. Nathan's voice followed, calm and real. And for the first time in years, Emma Caldwell let herself simply stand still in the middle of everything she'd once been afraid to lose and breathe. The night was still, the kind of stillness that felt deliberate, as if the world had paused long enough for something fragile to be said aloud. Nathan Reed's studio on the top floor of Redwood's old annex had been restored just as he'd left it months earlier. The warm lamplight spilled across sketches, woodworking tools, and scattered pages of half-finished designs. But now the space felt different, not sterile or solemn, but alive again. Emma stood near the window, looking out at the glow of the city. The reflection of the skyline shimmered faintly on the glass, mingling with the quiet pulse of the streetlights below. Nathan was at his workbench, sanding the edge of the wooden model ship, the same one that had cracked during the chaos of the investigation. Its small hull gleamed softly beneath his steady hands. You fixed it, she said gently. He smiled without looking up. Not perfectly, but it floats again. She walked closer, her heels silent against the old oak floor. You always come back to this ship. Nathan set the sandpaper down, wiped his hands on a rag, and leaned against the table. Maybe because it reminds me of us. Emma raised a brow, half amused. Us, he nodded, a little cracked, weathered, but still afloat. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that slipped out before she could stop it. That's one way to describe surviving a corporate storm. He turned toward her fully then, the humor fading into something quieter. Emma, can I tell you something I probably should have said a long time ago? The seriousness in his voice made her heart catch. She nodded, though her voice felt small. Of course. He took a slow breath. When everything fell apart, when the company was burning down and the press was circling, the only thing that made sense to me was you. The way you stood there, the way you didn't flinch. You were the calm in every chaos I ever caused. She looked away, her throat tightening. Nathan. He stepped closer, leaving a careful space between them. I don't mean this as gratitude or as guilt. I mean it as truth. I love you. Emma. The words hung in the air, simple, steady, without fanfare. No grand declarations, no sweeping music, just honesty, quiet and real. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. It wasn't surprise that struck her, it was recognition. Something she had felt for months but never dared to name. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled like the edge of a memory. You can't say things like that so easily. It's not easy, he said softly. It's just time. She turned toward him, her eyes bright in the lamplight. Do you know how long I spent trying to be seen as more than the quiet one in the corner, the assistant who listens, the woman who fixes everyone's mistakes? I finally found myself again. And now you're asking me to share it. Nathan nodded slowly. I know what that means. You don't want to disappear into someone else's story. Exactly, she whispered. I've seen women lose themselves to love that looked noble but felt like a cage. He took another step closer, careful, respectful. Then don't lose yourself. I don't want that for you. I don't want someone who needs me. I want someone who chooses me freely, without surrender. Her eyes met his, searching, uncertain, drawn in despite herself. And if I say no, he smiled faintly, sadness softening the corners of his mouth. Then I'll keep fixing this ship and wish you calm waters. That disarmed her more than any confession could. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, tender. Emma walked to the workbench, tracing the wooden ship's bow with her fingertips. The grain of the wood felt warm, alive beneath her touch. You know, she said softly, my father used to say love isn't supposed to save you. It's supposed to see you. Nathan's voice dropped low. Then I see you. Emma Caldwell. Something inside her gave way. Not collapse, but surrender of resistance. She reached for his hand, slowly, deliberately. Their fingers met above the small ship, the symbol of all they'd repaired, all they'd refused to let sink. For a moment, neither spoke. Their hands rested together, the faint hum of the city below and the whisper of the rain against the glass filling the silence. Emma finally broke it. I don't know where this goes, she admitted. I just know it feels right. Nathan nodded. That's enough for me. They stood there for a long time, the lamplight wrapping them in gold and quiet. No promises of forever, no vows, just a shared stillness that felt like peace. Then Nathan reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. You once told me not to work through every storm alone, he murmured. She smiled faintly. I remember. He lifted their joined hands, still resting above the wooden ship. Maybe this time, we don't have to. Emma looked down at their fingers. Two people who had weathered chaos, loss, and truth, and saw not dependency, but partnership. All right then, she said softly. Let's see where the wind takes us. Nathan smiled, quiet, genuine, utterly at ease. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle mist, the city lights glimmering against the horizon. The ship between them caught the lamplight, its repaired hull glowing faintly, a small vessel ready for another voyage. And as they stood there, hands entwined, hearts steady, the world, at last, felt whole enough to move forward. The mornings came slower now. Not in the way of fatigue, but in the way of peace, the kind earned after too many years of running uphill. The house sat on a low rise above the Oregon coast, surrounded by wind-brushed grasses and the endless sound of the tide. The ocean stretched out like memory itself, vast, untamed, forgiving. In the kitchen, Emma Caldwell moved quietly between the counter and the window, barefoot, the smell of coffee mingling with sea air. She wore her old plaid pajama top, soft from 100 washes, tucked under a faded gray cardigan. The same one. The one from that night. Sunlight poured through the wide window, painting everything in gold, the wooden cabinets, the ceramic mugs, the small photo frame on the shelf above the sink. Inside the frame was the picture that had started it all, a slightly blurry selfie of Emma, smiling wearily at the camera, wearing that same pajama top beneath her office blazer. The caption she'd meant to send to her father, still working late again. A mistake that changed everything. Nathan Reed entered the kitchen, barefoot as well, his hair tousled, his white t-shirt creased in comfortable imperfection. He leaned against the doorframe, smiling as he watched her pour coffee. "You know," he said, voice still rough with mourning, "I'll never understand how you can drink it black and call that peace." Emma smiled without looking back. "It's not peace, it's penance." He laughed quietly. "You'd think after saving an entire company, you'd allow yourself a little sugar." She turned, 2 mugs in hand. "And you'd think after stepping down as CEO, you'd stop getting up at 5, ma'am." He accepted the mug with mock defeat. Old habits. Or old guilt she teased. He grinned, maybe both. They sat by the kitchen window, the rhythmic crash of waves below them. Outside, gulls wheeled in the pink light of early dawn. For a long while, neither spoke. It was the kind of silence that no longer felt empty, only full. On the wall beside the window hung a small shelf of keepsakes, a miniature wooden ship, polished and repaired. A framed quote from her father, handwritten integrity is what you do when no one's watching. And the photo, that ridiculous, fateful pajama selfie. Nathan followed her gaze to it and smiled softly. "You kept it?" "I almost didn't," she said. "I thought about deleting it. For a long time, I couldn't look at it without cringing. And now it reminds me that sometimes the universe uses our most embarrassing mistakes to get our attention." He nodded, thoughtful. "You really believe that?" She sipped her coffee, eyes on the horizon. "I have to. Otherwise, all the storms wouldn't make sense." He leaned back, studying her face, the soft confidence, the quiet humor that had weathered every trial. "Do you ever miss it, Redwood?" she asked. He nodded. She smiled faintly. "Some parts, the people, the purpose. The late nights when we believed fixing one company could fix the world." He chuckled. "You did fix it." She looked at him. "We fixed it. Then we learned it's not about fixing. It's about becoming." Nathan exhaled, the truth of it settling deep. "I think I spent half my life building walls of glass, thinking if everything looked perfect, I'd be safe. And the other half breaking them," she teased gently. "Something like that," he said with a smile. "But you taught me that the cracks let the light in." Emma reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "And you taught me that kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole." The ocean filled the pause between them, steady, endless, alive, on the counter. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Dad, morning. Kiddo. Forecast says rain. Don't let it stop you from walking the beach." She smiled. "Dad says we should go outside." Nathan groaned playfully. "Your dad's turned into our life coach. Pretty good one, too," she said, standing. They stepped out onto the back porch, mugs in hand, as the first droplets began to fall soft, misty rain blending with sea spray. The light over the water shimmered like memory, fragile, fleeting, beautiful. Nathan slipped his arm lightly around her shoulders. "You ever think about how strange this is? All of it." Emma leaned against him, her voice calm. "Every day. But then I remember something my father said once, after Mom died. What's that? That life's not about avoiding storms. It's about learning to breathe in the rain." Nathan smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You think we've learned?" "I think we're still learning," she said. They stood there in the drizzle, the sound of waves folding into their silence. Inside, The frame photo caught the morning light. A soft gleam on the glass, the reminder of how small beginnings can echo through entire lives. Later, as the clouds began to clear, Emma sat at her writing desk by the window, journaling something she did every morning now. Nathan was in the next room, humming softly as he worked on a new design, not for profit this time, but for joy. She wrote slowly, the pen gliding across the page. A mistake once sent my life into chaos. But it wasn't the mistake that changed me. It was what it revealed. Sometimes the smallest misstep is the universe's way of reminding us what it means to be seen. She closed the journal, exhaling softly. Outside, the ocean stretched beyond the window, a mirror of everything they'd endured and everything they'd yet to become. The camera would fade here, soft light. Ocean sound, the frame photo catching the glow of daybreak, and Emma's voice, quiet, reflective, lingering. Sometimes the smallest mistake is the universe's way of reminding us what it means to be seen. A pause, then the final question. One meant not for Nathan, not for Emma, but for the listener, wherever they might be. What if your most embarrassing moment turned out to be the beginning of your truest life? The sound of waves swelled, fade to silence. Sometimes, life's greatest turning points come dressed as embarrassment, a wrong message, a misplaced word, a moment you wish you could undo. But the truth is those moments often reveal who we are beneath the masks we wear. Emma's story reminds us that being seen isn't about perfection, it's about honesty. When we stop performing for the world and start showing up as ourselves, even in plaid pajamas, we invite connection, compassion, and real change. For those of us who've lived long enough to carry both pride and regret, this story whispers a gentle truth: forgiveness, whether given or received, can rebuild more than reputations. It can rebuild the heart. So, maybe the next time you stumble, forget your lines, or send a message you wish you hadn't. Pause before the shame sets in. Ask yourself instead, what if this is how life reminds me to be real again? Because sometimes, the mistakes that break us open are the very ones that set us free. Thank you for spending your time with us, for listening with an open heart, and for believing, just like Emma, that even the smallest mistake can lead to something beautiful. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep creating stories that remind us of kindness, courage, and the quiet power of second chances. Stay tuned for more shining stories where every ordinary moment hides an extraordinary truth.